The ceremonial hall of the Valorian imperial palace gleamed under artificial starlight, its crystalline walls refracting colors that had no names in human languages. Jake Morrison kept his eyes down, pushing his maintenance cart along the far wall. He'd learned early that staying invisible was the key to survival on alien worlds. The ceremony unfolding before him was none of his business. 12 suitors stood in a semicircle before Princess Kyra, each representing a different faction of the Valorian Empire's vast network of allies. They were magnificent specimens, towering warriors clad in ceremonial armor, diplomats with skin that shimmered like liquid mercury, generals whose very presence commanded attention. Jake caught a glimpse of the princess. She sat rigid on her throne, her violet eyes scanning the assembled suitors with an expression that might have been carved from ice. Emperor Valth stood beside her, his forearms crossed in a gesture that brooked no argument. "Kyra, you will choose now." The Emperor's voice boomed across the hall. "The Krethian dominion masses at our borders. We need these alliances. Choose your mate and secure our future." Jake tightened his grip on the maintenance cart handle. Politics. Always politics. It was the same across every species, every world. He'd seen it destroy Earth's colonial ambitions, seen good people sacrificed on the altar of necessary alliances. He started to move toward the service exit. "I have chosen." Kyra's voice rang clear and cold. The hall fell silent. Jake paused despite himself. Kyra rose from her throne, descended the 3 steps with measured grace, and walked past all 12 suitors. Their confusion was palpable. She moved across the polished floor, her ceremonial gown trailing behind her like liquid starlight. Jake realized with dawning horror that she was walking toward him. She stopped 3 feet away and pointed directly at his chest. "Him. I choose the human." The explosion of outrage was immediate. Suitors shouted protests. Court officials gasped. The Emperor's face darkened to a deep purple. Jake stood frozen, his hand still gripping the cart handle like a drowning man clutching driftwood. "Princess Kyra, this is madness." One of the suitors, a Carthaxian general named Vorn, stepped forward. "He is a maintenance worker, a human. His species couldn't even hold their own colonies." "The law is clear," Kyra said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I may choose any sentient being present at the ceremony. I have chosen Jake Morrison, human citizen, employed in maintenance services for the Imperial Palace." She turned to face her father. "The law is ancient and absolute. You cannot deny it without undermining every tradition you claim to uphold." Emperor Valth's eyes narrowed. "Guards, bring the human forward." 2 Imperial guards, each twice Jake's size, grabbed him by the arms and hauled him toward the center of the hall. His cart clattered to the floor behind him. They forced him to his knees before the Emperor. "Look at me, human," Valth commanded. Jake raised his eyes. The Emperor's 4 eyes studied him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "Why would my daughter choose you?" "I have no idea, Your Majesty," Jake said honestly. His voice came out steadier than he felt. "I clean floors and fix environmental systems. I've never spoken to the princess." "She has spoken truth," Kyra said, moving to stand beside her father. "Jake Morrison has never addressed me directly, but I have observed him. For 6 months, I have watched him work," the court murmured. Jake's mind raced. 6 months? He'd been invisible, or so he'd thought. "I have watched him solve problems that baffled our engineers," Kyra continued. 2 months ago, when the Southern Wing's life support failed, he bypassed 3 separate system failures, using nothing but spare parts and improvisation. He saved 47 lives that day. When Chief Engineer Malthus tried to claim credit, Jake said nothing. He simply returned to his duties. Jake remembered that day. The alarms, the panic, the desperate scramble to reroute power. He'd done what needed doing. It hadn't seemed like anything special. "I have watched him treat every being with quiet respect, regardless of rank or species," Kyra said. "I have seen him share his meal rations with younger workers. I have observed integrity without performance, competence without arrogance. These are qualities I value above political convenience." "These qualities do not win wars," Emperor Valth said coldly. "Neither do forced alliances built on resentment," Kyra replied. The Emperor's expression hardened. "You may have chosen according to law, daughter, but law also provides recourse. The right of challenge." If any suitor disputes your choice, they may invoke trial by combat. If your chosen mate cannot prove his worth, your selection is void. General Vorn stepped forward immediately. I invoke the right of challenge. 2 more suitors joined him. A Krethian named Dravok, whose species were known for their brutal efficiency in combat, and a Thalasian warrior poet named Kelris, whose people had conquered 6 systems through superior tactics. The human will face 3 trials, the Emperor declared, 1 against each challenger. Standard combat rules: victory by submission or incapacitation. Death is permitted but discouraged. He looked down at Jake with something that might have been pity. You may refuse and face only exile. Your species has already lost much. No one would fault you for preserving your life. Jake's mind worked rapidly. Exile meant returning to Earth, to the broken remnants of humanity's failed expansion. It meant watching his niece grow up in poverty and desperation. It meant dying slowly in a species that had given up hope. But accepting meant almost certain death. These warriors had trained their entire lives. He'd been a military engineer, not a soldier. He'd fired weapons in basic training and never again. He looked up at Kyra. Her violet eyes met his, and he saw something there. Not pleading, not manipulation, but a strange kind of recognition. She'd made a desperate gamble, using him as a piece in a game he didn't understand. But she'd also seen him when he'd thought himself invisible. She'd valued things that his own species had stopped valuing years ago. I accept the challenge, Jake said. The court erupted again. The Emperor raised one hand for silence. So be it. The first trial will commence at dawn tomorrow. The human will be provided quarters, and whatever preparation time remains. He gestured to the guards. Take him to the challenger's wing. As they hauled Jake to his feet, Kyra stepped close enough that only he could hear her whisper. I am sorry, but I could not marry any of them. They would have used me as a weapon against my people. You were the only choice that gave me power. You could have warned me, Jake muttered. Would you have agreed? He thought about it. Probably not. Survive tomorrow, Jake Morrison, and I will ensure you never have to be invisible again. The guards pulled him away before he could respond. They led him through corridors he'd only cleaned, never walked as a guest. The challenger's wing was luxurious, in a way that made his maintenance quarters look like a prison cell. They left him alone with the warning that he had 12 hours until the first trial. Jake sat on the edge of an enormous bed and put his head in his hands. What had he agreed to? General Vorn was a veteran of 30 campaigns. His species had natural armor plating and strength that could crush steel. Jake had a maintenance technician's knowledge of systems and a body that ached from too many years of physical labor. He stood and began to pace. Think. He'd survived this long by thinking, by seeing patterns others missed, by finding solutions in the gaps between the obvious. Combat was just another system. Every system had vulnerabilities. He spent the next several hours using the room's holographic interface to research his opponents. Vorn, Dravok, and Kelris. He studied their species' physiology, their fighting styles, their recorded victories. He made notes, drew diagrams, and slowly began to form a plan. It was desperate and probably suicidal, but it was something. When dawn came, guards arrived to escort him to the arena. The space was smaller than he'd expected. Perhaps 50 meters across, surrounded by viewing galleries packed with court officials and nobility. The floor was bare stone, offering no cover. Standard combat rules meant he could request basic weapons from an approved list. General Vorn entered from the opposite side, his armor gleaming. He was 3 meters tall, his Carthaxian physiology all muscle and natural plating. He carried a plasma blade that hummed with lethal energy. The Arbiter, a neutral Valorian judge, stepped forward. The human may select his armament. Jake had memorized the approved list during his research. I request a standard maintenance multi-tool, 1 coil of high-tensile cable, and 3 Type 7 flash charges. The crowd murmured in confusion. These were not weapons, but equipment. The Arbiter consulted the rules and nodded. Approved. These items are not prohibited. The equipment materialized on the arena floor near Jake. He collected it quickly, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd used these tools 10,000 times. Vorn watched with obvious contempt. You think to repair me to death, human? Vorn's laugh was like grinding stone. Begin, the Arbiter declared. Vorn charged immediately, his plasma blade cutting a glowing arc through the air. Jake dove to the side, rolling and coming up running. The multi-tool had a laser cutter, low-powered but precise. He activated it, slicing through his own shirt and wrapping the fabric around his left hand as improvised padding. Forner turned and charged again. This time Jake didn't run. He stood his ground until the last possible second, then dropped to the floor and rolled between Vorn's legs, trailing the high tensile cable behind him. Vorn's momentum carried him forward 3 more steps before the cable caught his ankle. Jake had looped it around a floor drainage grate he'd spotted during his entrance. The cable went taut. Vorn crashed face first into the stone with a sound like a dropped anvil. His plasma blade skittered across the floor. Jake was already moving, igniting a flash charge and throwing it at Vorn's face. The Krethian species had excellent vision, but were extremely sensitive to sudden light changes. Vorn roared in pain and disorientation. Jake grabbed the plasma blade. It was too large for his hands, but he'd studied its operation. Krethian armor had seams at the joints for flexibility. He darted in, found the seam at Vorn's right shoulder and pressed the blade against it, not cutting, just holding. Yield, Jake said, breathing hard. I don't want to cripple you. Vorn could have thrown him off. Even disoriented, the general's strength was overwhelming, but Jake had made his point. He'd won not through superior force, but through superior understanding of the environment and his opponent's weaknesses. I yield, Vorn growled. The crowd's silence was absolute. Jake stepped back, deactivating the plasma blade and offering his hand to help Vorn stand. The general stared at the gesture for a long moment before accepting it. You fight without honor, Vorn said. I fight to survive, Jake replied. There's a difference. The second trial came 3 hours later, barely enough time for Jake to catch his breath. Dravok was different from Vorn. Smaller, faster, and far more tactical. The Krethian entered the arena with twin shock batons and a smile that showed too many teeth. This time, Jake requested a different loadout. A portable welding torch, a canister of industrial foam insulation, and a sound amplification device used for announcing maintenance schedules. Again, the Arbiter approved the unusual selection. Dravok didn't charge blindly. He circled, studying Jake with cold calculation. Jake recognized the pattern. Dravok was analyzing him, looking for tells, planning his attack for maximum efficiency. Jake spoke first. You know your species is dying out, right? Dravok's circling stopped. What? Krethian birth rates have been declining for 3 generations. Something about your home world's atmospheric processors breaking down. I read about it during my shift last month when I was repairing the archive access terminals. Jake was making his voice loud, using the sound amplifier to project across the arena. Your people are desperate for resources, for new worlds. That's why you're here, isn't it? Not for Kyra, but for access to Valorian terraforming technology. Dravok's expression flickered with something. Surprise? Perhaps anger. The Krethian Dominion sent you to infiltrate through marriage, Jake continued, spraying the industrial foam in a wide arc across the floor between them. The substance expanded rapidly, creating an uneven, sticky surface. You're not a suitor. You're a spy. Lies, Dravok hissed, but his reaction time was a fraction too slow. He'd been thrown off balance psychologically. When he finally attacked, leaping over the foam barrier, Jake was ready. He triggered the welding torch at maximum intensity, creating a brilliant arc of plasma directly in Dravok's path. Krethian vision operated in different spectra than most species. The intense light didn't just blind Dravok. It caused him physical pain. He twisted midair, landed badly on the foam, and his feet stuck. Jake was on him in seconds. Using the shock batons Dravok had dropped against their owner. 2 quick strikes to nerve clusters Jake had memorized from his research. Dravok collapsed, convulsing. Jake stepped back. Yield or I'll keep going. I yield, Dravok gasped, but as the Arbiter moved forward to declare the match over, Dravok's hand shot out with a concealed blade, a weapon not on the approved list. The Krethian lunged at Jake's throat, murder in his eyes. Jake barely managed to block with the shock baton, but the force of the impact sent him sprawling backward. Imperial guards flooded the arena immediately. They restrained Dravok, whose disguise of civility had finally shattered. "The human speaks lies," Dravok shouted. "I am a loyal suitor, not, what?" Princess Kyra's voice cut through the chaos. She had descended from the viewing gallery and now stood at the arena's edge. "Not an assassin sent by the Dominion to kill me during the mate selection ceremony? Guards, scan him for biological augmentation." The guards obeyed. Within seconds, they detected neural implants designed for encrypted communication and combat enhancement. Technology far beyond what any legitimate suitor would carry. Emperor Valf's face darkened to nearly black. "Dravok of the Krethian Dominion, you are accused of espionage and attempted murder. You will be questioned, and if the human's accusations prove true, your Dominion will answer for this insult." As guards dragged Dravok away, Jake remained on the arena floor, his heart pounding. He'd taken a wild guess based on fragments of information, reports he'd half-read while cleaning archive terminals. He'd been trying to rattle his opponent, not expose an actual conspiracy. Kyra approached him, ignoring protocol. "How did you know?" "I didn't," Jake admitted. "I just noticed patterns. Krethian trade requests in the diplomatic logs focused heavily on terraforming. Their military movements near our border were inconsistent with their stated defensive posture, and Dravok was too eager to fight me, like he wanted me dead specifically, not just out of the running." He paused. "I worked in military intelligence analysis before the colonial collapse. Old habits." Kyra studied him with new intensity. "You're wasted as a janitor." "Maybe I like being underestimated," Jake said. The third trial was postponed for a full day, while the Emperor's security forces investigated the extent of Krethian infiltration. Jake was moved to more secure quarters, with actual guards posted at his door. Whether to protect him or prevent him from running, he wasn't certain. Kyra visited him that evening, alone except for 2 discreet bodyguards who waited outside. "I owe you an explanation," she said, sitting in one of the room's chairs, without waiting for invitation. "Royal privilege." "Several, probably," Jake agreed. He was cleaning his maintenance multi-tool, a nervous habit. "Why me?" "Really? I told you the truth in the ceremonial hall," Kyra said. "I observed you. You were competent, honest, and invisible. The perfect choice for someone who needed to seize control of her own fate." She leaned forward. "But there was more. 3 months ago, I overheard you speaking with another maintenance worker, a young Talvian named Quiche. He had made an error in his work and was terrified of being dismissed. You took responsibility for his mistake and spent your rest period teaching him the correct procedure." Jake remembered. Quiche had been just a kid, barely adult by Talvian standards. So you had nothing to gain and everything to lose?" Kyra said. "You acted with kindness when you thought no one was watching. That is the rarest quality in this palace." She stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. "My father wants me to choose a mate who brings military strength or political alliance. Every suitor sees me as a stepping stone to power. You're the only one who didn't even know I existed." "I knew you existed," Jake said quietly. "Everyone knows the princess exists. I just didn't think I'd ever matter enough for you to notice me." "You matter now," Kyra said. "Tomorrow you face Kelris. He's the most dangerous of all, a Thalesian warrior poet who has never lost a sanctioned combat. He fights with both blade and mind. He won't be rattled by psychological tactics, like Dravok. Any advice?"
"Yes, survive."
"Because I need you, Jake Morrison. Not as a mate in the traditional sense, but as an ally, someone I can trust in a court full of vipers." She turned to face him. "If you win tomorrow, I will release you from the mate bond. You can return to your duties or leave the palace, or, Jake prompted, "or you can stay and help me change things. The Valorian Empire is rotting from within. The Krethian conspiracy proves it. We need people who see the patterns, who solve problems instead of creating them." Her violet eyes locked onto his. "I'm offering you a choice. Real choice. Not the forced selection I made in the ceremonial hall." Jake thought about Earth, about the slow death of hope, about his niece growing up in a species that had nothing left to believe in. Let me survive tomorrow first. This Pontaino's, then we'll talk about changing empires. Kyra smiled, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her. Deal. The third trial dawned cold and clear. Kelrus entered the arena like poetry in motion, his twin blades singing as they cut the air. He was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are, perfectly balanced, supremely confident, utterly lethal. The Arbiter asked Jake for his equipment selection. This time, Jake requested a simple metal staff, a container of powdered carbon ash used in air filtration systems, and a small mirror. Kelrus laughed, a sound like wind chimes. You mock me with children's toys? I respect you enough to fight smart, Jake replied. Begin. Kelrus moved like water, his blades flowing through forms that were simultaneously practical and artistic. Jake defended with his staff, blocking strikes that would have killed him, barely keeping the warrior at bay. He was outmatched, and they both knew it. But Jake had learned something from his previous fights. Every opponent had a pattern, a rhythm. He let Kelrus push him back, studying the flow of attacks, waiting for the moment when art became predictable. There. A particular flourish Kelrus favored. A figure-8 pattern that looked impressive but required a split-second reset. Jake threw the carbon ash into the air between them, creating a dark cloud. Then he dropped to one knee and angled the mirror to catch sunlight from the arena's transparent dome. The beam of reflected light cut through the ash cloud at knee height, exactly where Kelrus's blade would be during the reset phase of his flourish. The Thalassian saw it too late. His blade met the unexpected mirror surface, and the angle of deflection sent the weapon spinning from his hand. Jake was already moving. He swept Kelrus's legs with his staff, dropping the warrior to his back, then pressed the staff across Kelrus's throat. Not hard enough to choke, but firmly enough to make the point. Yield, Jake said. Kelrus stared up at him for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. Genuine mirth in the sound. You fight like no one I've ever faced, human. You turn weakness into advantage, predictability into trap. Very well. I yield, not to superior force, but to superior cunning. Jake helped him up. Unlike Vorn's grudging acceptance, Kelrus clasped his shoulder with respect. Princess Kyra chose more wisely than any of us knew. The crowd erupted in noise, some cheering, some protesting, all shocked. Jake had done the impossible. He'd defeated 3 elite warriors using nothing but improvisation and analysis. Emperor Valth descended to the arena floor, his expression unreadable. You have proven your worth through trial by combat, Jake Morrison. The mate bond stands legally. He paused, studying Jake. But I am curious. What do you truly want from this situation? Jake glanced at Kyra, who stood beside her father. Honestly, I want to help. I've spent years being invisible, watching systems fail because people in power couldn't see the simple solutions right in front of them. If I can be useful, really useful, then maybe I've found something worth staying for. The Emperor's expression softened slightly. Then perhaps my daughter's madness has unexpected wisdom. He raised his voice to address the crowd. Jake Morrison has earned the right to stand beside Princess Kyra, but our troubles are far from over. The Krethian conspiracy must be rooted out completely. As if summoned by those words, alarms began to shriek throughout the palace. A court official ran into the arena, his face pale. Your Majesty! Long-range sensors have detected a Krethian battle fleet emerging from hyperspace. 50 capital ships, heading directly for the homeworld. They'll be in weapons range within 6 hours. The crowd dissolved into panic. Emperor Valth's face went from purple to nearly white. This is impossible. We have a non-aggression pact with the Dominion. A pact they clearly never intended to honor, Jake said quietly. Dravok wasn't just here to assassinate Kyra. He was feeding intelligence about palace defenses, fleet positions, everything. They've been planning this invasion for months. Kyra turned to her father. We need to evacuate the civilian sectors and mobilize the defense fleet immediately. Our fleet is scattered across 3 systems, the Emperor said, his voice hollow. We can recall them, but it will take 8 hours minimum. The Krethians will have orbital bombardment capability in 6. Then we hold them off for 2 hours, Jake said. Everyone turned to stare at him. What? You didn't think I was just good at fixing toilets, did you? Emperor Valf looked at him with something approaching hope. You were military intelligence, you said. Do you have actual combat experience? I was a combat engineer with the Terran Colonial Marines, Jake replied. I specialized in defensive fortifications and unconventional tactics. We lost the colony wars, but we made the enemy pay for every meter of ground. He looked around the arena, his mind already racing through possibilities. Your palace has defensive capabilities, right? Yes, Valth said, but they're designed to withstand siege, not orbital bombardment. And they're largely automated. We only have 300 guards on planet. Most of our military is with the fleet. 300 is enough if we use them right, Jake said. And automated defenses are just systems. Systems can be optimized, Tin says. He turned to Kyra. I'll need full access to palace security networks, defensive weapon controls, and a direct line to whoever's commanding the evacuation effort. Done, Kyra said immediately. She looked at her father. Give him command of the planetary defense. He's a human janitor who won 3 fights, one of the court officials protested. He's also the only person in this room who's actually fought a defensive battle, Kyra snapped. Unless you have better credentials? The official fell silent. Emperor Valf made his decision. Jake Morrison, you have operational command of planetary defense until our fleet arrives. Succeed and you'll have earned more than a mate bond. You'll have earned the Empire's gratitude. I'll settle for surviving the next 2 hours, Jake muttered. The next 6 hours were a blur of frantic preparation. Jake commandeered the palace's strategic operations center, surrounding himself with displays showing sensor data, defensive positions, and civilian evacuation routes. The 300 Imperial guards looked at him with skepticism initially, but Jake didn't waste time trying to win them over with speeches. He showed them the math. Krethian battle doctrine favors overwhelming firepower concentrated on strategic targets, he explained, highlighting sections of the palace on a holographic display. They'll go for the shield generators first, then the orbital defense platforms. Standard tactics? Predictable. He smiled grimly. Predictable means exploitable. He had the guards reposition the orbital defense platforms in seemingly random patterns that actually created overlapping fields of fire. He rerouted power from non-essential palace systems to boost shield strength by 30%. He identified 18 locations where the palace's ancient architecture created natural choke points and had them rigged with improvised weapons using maintenance equipment. We're not trying to destroy their fleet, Jake told the assembled guards. We're trying to delay them, frustrate them, make them commit resources inefficiently. We're buying time. Kyra worked beside him, coordinating civilian evacuations with ruthless efficiency. She'd shed her ceremonial gown for practical military attire and moved through the operations center like she'd been born to command. Jake caught himself glancing at her more than tactically necessary. Focus, Morrison, she said without looking up from her display, but she was smiling. When the Krethian fleet arrived, they came exactly as Jake predicted. 50 capital ships in a standard invasion formation. Weapons hot, demands for immediate surrender broadcast on all frequencies. Negative, Emperor Valth responded personally. The Valorian Empire does not bow to treaty breakers and assassins. The first wave of Krethian bombardment hammered the planetary shields. Jake watched the energy readouts spike, waited until the exact moment when Krethian targeting sensors would be recalibrating after the initial strike, then had every orbital defense platform fire simultaneously at the coordinates he'd calculated. The fleet's neat formation scattered as ships moved to avoid further fire. It wasn't much, but it bought them precious minutes. They're adapting faster than expected, one of the guard commanders noted nervously. Good, Jake said. Predictable enemies are boring. He activated the next phase of his defense, a series of what appeared to be malfunctioning shield generators that kept flickering on and off. The Krethians took the bait, concentrating fire on what they thought were weakened positions, but the flickering was controlled. Each time a Krethian ship committed to attacking a weak generator, Jake had the nearby platforms target the attacking ship's exposed flanks. It was death by 1,000 cuts, trading shield strength for incremental damage to the enemy fleet. An hour passed, then 90 minutes. The palace shields were at 40% and falling, Civilian evacuations were 95% complete. The Krethian fleet was getting frustrated, burning through ammunition faster than optimal, making small tactical errors. 2 hours, Kyra said quietly. The first elements of our fleet just entered the system. They're engaging the Krethian rear guard. On the displays, Jake saw new contacts appearing. Valorian warships dropping out of hyperspace and immediately opening fire. The Krethian admiral made the fatal mistake of trying to fight on 2 fronts simultaneously. His fleet's formation collapsed completely. What followed was brutal and decisive. The Valorian fleet, despite being outnumbered, had tactical advantage and momentum. The Krethians fought desperately, but within 30 minutes it was clear they'd lost. Ships began to surrender or retreat. The few that tried to continue the bombardment were eliminated with ruthless efficiency. Emperor Valth stood in the operations center, watching his fleet dismantle the invasion force. He turned to Jake. You held them. Against impossible odds, you held them. I had good people working with me, Jake said, exhausted. And good intel from Dravok's interrogation. We knew their tactics. Tactics are useless without the wit to exploit them, Valth said. He placed one hand on Jake's shoulder, a gesture of profound respect in Valorian culture. You have earned your place here, human, not as a trophy or a political symbol, but as a valued member of this court. In the aftermath, as the palace began cleanup and damage assessment, Jake found himself on a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors Earth had never quite managed. Kyra joined him without announcement. The court officials are calling you the hero of Valoria, she said. Quite the upgrade from janitor. I like being invisible, Jake said. It was simpler. Nothing about you is simple, Jake Morrison. My father has offered you a formal position as strategic defense advisor. The court has reluctantly agreed that your insights are valuable, and the mate bond still stands, though you're free to dissolve it if you choose. Jake was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights begin to flicker on as evening deepened. What do you want? Honestly, Kyra turned to face him. I want a partner, not in the romantic sense necessarily, but someone I can trust completely in a world where trust is the rarest commodity. Someone who sees solutions instead of problems. Someone who is willing to risk everything for people he barely knew. That's a lot to ask from a janitor, Jake said. Then it's fortunate I'm not asking a janitor anymore. Kyra extended her hand. I'm asking Jake Morrison, the man who saw me when he thought he was invisible, who fought 3 trials with nothing but cleverness, who saved an empire with maintenance tools and math. I'm asking you to stay. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. Jake looked at her offered hand. He thought about Earth, about the slow death of hope his species had chosen. He thought about his niece and the message he could send her, that humanity wasn't finished, that one human had found a place to matter again. He thought about 6 months of watching Kyra from the shadows, seeing her trapped by politics and duty, recognizing someone else who'd learned to be invisible for survival. He took her hand. I'll stay. But I have conditions. Kyra laughed. Of course you do. I want resources allocated to help human refugees. Not charity, but real opportunities, training, positions, respect. My species lost our colonies, but we didn't lose our value. Agreed. I want direct access to you and your father when I identify problems in the palace systems. No bureaucracy, no filtering through officials who want to maintain the status quo. Done. And I keep my maintenance multi-tool. You never know when you'll need to improvise. Kyra's smile was brilliant. I wouldn't dream of taking it from you. She paused. Anything else? Jake considered. Maybe someday we figure out if this partnership could be something more. But that's not a condition. That's just a possibility to explore when we're not fighting conspiracies and invasions. I'd like that, Kyra said softly. Below them, the city continued its evening transformation. Somewhere in the palace, engineers were already analyzing Jake's defensive tactics, incorporating them into formal doctrine. Somewhere in space, the captured Krethian ships were being interrogated for intelligence about the Dominion's broader plans. Somewhere on Earth, Jake's niece would soon receive a message that her uncle had done something impossible. But here, On this balcony, two people who'd learned to survive by being invisible stood together in plain sight, partners in a future neither had planned, but both chose to build. "So," Jake said after a comfortable silence, "what's next?" Kyra's expression turned calculating. The Krethian invasion was just a symptom. We have corruption in the court, outdated military doctrine, economic systems that ignore half our population's potential. You've shown me that the most powerful changes come from seeing what everyone else overlooks. Sounds like you're planning a revolution. More like evolution, Kyra corrected. But yes, I'm planning to change an empire. One overlooked problem at a time. She met his eyes. Still want to stay? Jake thought about all the years he'd spent invisible, fixing problems no one noticed, surviving in systems designed to make people like him disappear. He thought about Princess Kyra pointing at him in a ceremonial hall, making a desperate choice that gave them both power they'd never had before. He smiled. "Where's my maintenance cart? We've got work to do." And in the gathering darkness, with stars beginning to appear overhead, they began planning their next impossible victory, not with weapons or politics, but with the same tools Jake had always used: observation, adaptation, and the stubborn human refusal to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. The janitor and the princess, partners by choice, stood ready to clean up an empire's mess, one system at a time.